Good morning. It's been a minute. Haven't done this since since New Year. Had family visiting and stuff like that, and to be honest with you, I just needed a minute. This can wear you out, and so I needed a minute. But I'm here, and I have 2 more videos, this one and the next one, and then I will be done with this series. I would like to pray now because I want to invite, of course, Jesus in to share with you whatever it is that I'll be sharing today, and review kind of where we left off and hope for the best as far as the outcome. So I'm going to pray. Dear Heavenly Father, I just commit this video to you, and I just ask for your will to be done. Lord, I'm trying to be obedient and even making these videos. And to be honest with you, Lord, my voice is one of millions of voices out there, especially with the avenue by which I'm making this video. I don't know that people are listening or even care what I have to say, because who am I, Lord? The only thing I do know is that you love me and that you've blessed me and you've been merciful and gracious to me through this journey, and I want to honor you and finish strong with this book, video book. And I just pray, Lord, that you would open the hearts and minds of people to hear what it is you have to say, because what I think and feel doesn't matter. It's only what you think and feel. And help me to know what to say and what not to say. I just commit this to you in Jesus' name. Amen. Hey guys, I'm a little tired today, and to be honest with you, I'm a little anxious about, I feel like I need to scoot this back because you seem really close to me. I think I struggle with doing this last part of the video. Part of the reason why is there's, as much as beautiful things happen, some rough stuff happened at this this next section of my life. As a matter of fact, I say that one of the hardest years I've ever had in my life occurred during this time, and I didn't want to talk about it. It's that simple. I just didn't want to talk about it. But I'm going to review where I left off. We'll start there because that I can do. We were at the house, that flip house, and you can go back and watch the video. And we were having to leave because we couldn't keep it. And we had reached out to a realtor to help us find a place to live. Well, he had 3 houses that he wanted to show us, and all 3 houses were for sale, not for rent. But he showed us them anyway, that maybe that the people would be interested in renting it. Well, he had showed me us the 3 houses, and when we went to the first house, it was huge and it was beautiful. It was in the lake, the place that I had wished to live when I was 11, in the very place that I wished to live, even though at this age I didn't really want to live in the lake because I had lived in surrounding areas of the lake, and I just didn't want to be secluded in the lake. I wanted, because it's a gated community, I wanted to be with the people at this point because I had done a lot of ministry, which I told you guys in the other video. And so we look at the first house, and I'm like, yeah. So I'm thinking, like, okay, maybe. Then we look at the second house, and I had in my head some ideas because my daughter was in competitive dance, and I wanted a place to have a studio for her. Excuse me. And I also wanted a place to have a studio, or a place to exercise, and because I had, gotten sick with my heart, and I also wanted a place to have a studio because I was starting to get into photography. Well, and I forgot to tell you that while I was at this other house, the one that we were getting ready to leave, when I had gotten up one day to take my medicine kind of early on, I think I told you about I saw out the window an owl attacking a rabbit. And I felt like God was warning me that it was going to be a difficult year that year. And then there was a time where the words fire and water came, and I knew that was going to be a difficult time. And then there was one year where there was a deer just sitting under this same apple tree. And I knew that God was telling me that was going to be a year of peace, because these happen at separate times around the same time of the year, at the end of the year, December. Well, one of the times I was standing at that kitchen and I was looking out the back, because like I said, we had 5 lots, and the house was super tiny, but the lot was big. And so I remember having a vision of a Christ Center Community Center, because the one thing, like Satan, life is really hard, and sometimes it's hard to tell, like, is this from God? Is this from Satan? Is this from the enemy? Or is this from my flesh? You know, like, what is this? But the one thing that Satan can't do is he can't be creative. He uses the same tactics over and over again. God is a creative God. And creativity, I believe, is a gift. I think communication is a gift. There's a way to communicate through creativity, whether it be anything from dance to music to cooking, you know, to all the normal arts, to videography, photography, you know, spoken word. There's all kinds of ways to be creative, to creatively communicate, and that's what I had a vision of. And what I had a vision of was a Christ-centered communications community center, like a creative arts communications community center, somewhere where people could learn to communicate through the arts, through creativity, and to bring families together through crafting, or have like cooking parties or Bible studies there, or different things like that. And like, it was a dream that I held on to, and I still hold on to, and we went through the avenues to try and have that happen, and it didn't. It was rejected by the powers that be, but I still hold on to that dream. And I wanted to be, and that's what our ministry, my friend and I's ministry, was. We wanted to be liaisons between the churches and liaisons between the people in need and the people who could help. And I felt like my community center was going to represent all those things in my head. Of course, it never happened, and I kind of doubt that it will. So I'm not really sure what that vision or dream was, or whatever, you know. Maybe God has plans at some point that I'm unaware of, which he says his ways aren't our ways, and maybe I'm just supposed to simply communicate that to somebody else who will be the one to build it. I don't know. So with that being said, the second house, we go in, and it's a bi-level, and it's huge. It's as big as the first one, which was really big. Like, we're talking like, these houses are almost 4,000 square feet, like between 32 and 3,800 square feet, somewhere in there. Like, they're humongous, these houses. And so I went in the first one, and I thought, yeah, this is really pretty, and you know, and then that makes me sound ungrateful. It's not that. It's just I knew that I would feel it in my stomach. I can't explain it, but I said that to the realtor. I said, I'll know which house it is. I'll just know. God will tell me. I'll know. We walk into the second house. It's a bi-level, and I go upstairs, and it's an open floor plan, which I love. You know, there's kitchen, dining room, living room. There's a deck outside, a Three Seasons porch outside, off on the side of the deck that leads out from the dining room. You go down this hall, and it's a crooked hall. It sort of went this way and then turned, and something about that hall. I was like, oh my gosh, it's got a crooked hall. And I remember the realtor looking at me like I was a wacko. He was like, it's just like basically a 90-degree angle, which it wasn't. It wasn't like you straight and turned. It was sort of a, like, you went at an angle and then it turned and went at an angle. And I just, I loved it. I just fell in love with it. And there was like this big, beautiful jacuzzi tub. And then there's a bedroom on the right and it's humongous. And then we go down the hall, and on the left there's a master bedroom which has like like a huge walk-in closet, and then off of it has a bathroom just to put your makeup on or brush your teeth. And then you go through another door, and that's where it was a shower and toilet. And then again down the hall, and to your right was a laundry room, and there was cabinets at the end of the hallway. And then you went out to the garage, and then there was another door that you could come back in that would lead you to the basement. So the basement had 2 entries, and the basement had this huge space where I envisioned my daughter's dance studio, and it had another section which could have been a living room area, and then it had sort of this angled, foyer when you went down there, and off of that was a bathroom and a guest bedroom, and then there was this huge space that could be my studio and exercise and craft area, and it was perfect, like literally perfect. And in my spirit, I knew, I'm like, this is the house, this is the house, this is the house. Well, he shows us the 3rd house, and it was a beautiful house too, and I'm like, oh yeah, this is nice. And I go, it's the 2nd house. I know it's the 2nd house. And so we began to pray, because she was selling it and not renting it. So we prayed. And I just knew in my spirit, like, Lord, that's the house. Well, during this time, my brother had a rental, because my brother owns a bunch of property. He had a rental that was opening. And I told him, hey, we may move into the rental. So I was talking with him about going to see it. Well, we were supposed to go see the rental on a Friday, and on Thursday night, I got the call that the lady was going to let us rent the house. And so we got to move in my absolute favorite house, even to this day, that I've ever lived in. Absolutely beautiful. I loved, loved, loved this house. I still do. And I believe with my whole heart that that house was supposed to be ours, but I don't think that we got prepared in the waiting, because we ended up living at that house from 2012, from the end of April of 2012 to the end of September of 2016. So we were in that house for over 4 years, over 4.5 years. Well, almost 4.5 years. Is that right? May, June, July, August, September. Yeah, almost 4.5 years. I love that house so much. But I'm going to share with you some of the stuff that went on in that house. I started having parties because I had lived in such a tiny house. When I would have a party, it would be outside and stuff, but we started having parties inside. I would have Christmas parties, and we had minute to win it parties, and we had Hollywood game night parties, and God had surrounded us by some lovely people. We would go tubing and go to the beach, and because there's a beach in here, but the tubing, we would go down the river where we live, and God had surrounded us with some lovely people, and it was great. It really was in the beginning. And God had even, because I told you this church that I went to on and off, God had even brought up an opportunity that through the school that we administered to, they wanted an after-school program, a faith-based after-school program. And because I had been on the evangelism committee for a little bit, they needed someone to run it. So I sort of said, I'll do it, because I had quit we had quit doing the ministry for the town, And I was like, I'll do this. So I did this after school program, teaching, using my spiritual gift of teaching, and got to teach some kids for 2 whole years. And even though I was going to the church on and off and sort of more not than am, they let us use like their copier and papers and stuff to do this. So I thought that was really kind of them and sweet of them to be able to do that. It was also during this time, remember I had told you that about the park. There was a park that God really spoke to me in some of my toughest time. I had gone there when I had had my heart condition. I'd gone there when we were moving, when he had told me that there was beauty in the desert. Well, one day I'd gone to the park, and I'm not sure why, I can't remember or recall now why, but I'd gone through the park and I was driving through it, and I could feel God speaking to me. Well, I felt him telling me to bring my friend. And so I go to her house, and I've also felt him saying, don't say a word. Just be quiet. Just walk through the park and be quiet. Let me speak to her. Just you be quiet. Don't say a word. So I pick her up and I tell her, I'm like, hey, like when we hit the park, I'm not going to speak. And like whatever it is God's speaking to you, I just need to be quiet. So we walk through this beautiful trail that's there, because I had walked through the trail myself. And as we're walking through the trail, she's like a few feet ahead of me, and I'm just kind of praying and stuff. Well, afterward, you know, we get in the car and we leave the park, and then I'm able to talk. And so we start talking, and we're like, I don't know why, but I really felt like God wanted me to bring you there. Well, as we're talking, and I remember we were driving past my ex-husband's job where he worked, and we were merging onto our highway, our 4-lane highway, our bypass. And as I was merging onto it, because this wasn't where we live, this was about 20 minutes from where we live. As we were merging onto it, we figured it out. Because I was taking her home, she lived in a different town. We figured out what God was saying. And God was saying very clearly to both of us that we had abandoned the fight. That we left in the middle of a fight. That we were not fight like physical fight or fight like bring harm to someone, but fight for change. That we had left and we had abandoned our friends, and that we needed to apologize to people. So we did. I apologized, you know, because during that space, this span of 6 years that we had dealt with what was going on at this church, when I left in 2007, it was bitterness and resentment that drove me out, and I had to cope with that. And I had to go back and apologize. Save one thing. Remember I told you there was that pastor or that leader that I didn't get along with? I felt no need to apologize to him, because I felt like he needed to apologize to me because of the things he had done. I told you about him kicking us out of the church and different things. And I would never get my apology from him. And like I told you before, he has been a blessing to other people. He's just simply not a blessing to me. And because he's a leader, even though I don't go to that church anymore, I still need to honor and respect the fact that he's in the position that God put him in, which is to give him influence and financial stuff, you know. And I had told you about the youth leaders, and I know it was kind of confusing, and I want to make that clear here. The first youth pastor that I was talking about would become the associate pastor that pastored my children. He's still the pastor at that church, which he's a great guy. After him came the pastor that was influenced by that leader that I have issue with to not have anything to do with me or allow me around the youth. And remember, after I gave my public confession, they banned me from being around the youth. I could be around the little children, but I wasn't allowed to be around the youth. And so, which still bothers me to this day, because I think through my children, I was able to be around the youth while they were in college and stuff. They would bring their youth group here, and we were able to minister that way. And I was able to minister to my daughter, her friends who were teenagers, and we had Bible studies at our house or whatever. So I was able to minister that way. But all of my ministry now was outside of the church. Everything was outside of the church, and it had been for a while. And I don't know if that's why things went down the way they did, because I probably would have never stopped. I would have focused on my ministry inside the church, but God had clearly was changing me and showing me that my ministry was going to be outside the church. And so, yeah, that's sort of the recollection of, and the resolution of what happened with that. And even though this house, I loved it, we had so many great times there. There was a lot of changes. Like our daughter had started college, you know, and she even moved out for a semester, ended up coming back because she hated living on campus, but she had gotten a boyfriend, and then, you know, there was a lot of changes with my older two daughters, and there was just a lot of changes. And I don't know if you're a parent to adult children, but it's really difficult to be a parent to an adult child. But to be a parent to 3 adult children was even more difficult. One still lived far away. One, you know, had come back and forth from Chi-Town, and it was stressful. It was really stressful. They had struggled a lot with their health. All 3 of them began to struggle with their health. We had different things happen, and there was a lot of emotion and a lot of strain and a lot of stress and a lot of perception differences and perspective differences. And I told you in the other video about the thing about perspective, because our perception's based on our perspective. And I remember I described a hand, and I said, if you were to get to the fingernails, I would say there are no fingernails, but there actually are. My perspective doesn't show them. And about the block, the cube, that nobody could see all 6 sides of a cube except for the Lord. No matter which way you turn it, there was a perspective you couldn't see. Well, that's kind of what was happening here. We were just viewing things differently, very differently. And it caused a lot of strain and stress with my children. It was very difficult. And then we had things come to light that were very difficult to cope with and deal with. And we had health struggles that came to light, which were very difficult to deal with. And that's pretty much all I'm going to say about this time as far as that goes, because it was extremely painful. Extremely. There was even a lot of friendship loss in the process of it. And it was difficult. It was super, super hard. But at the end of this battle, this 1.5-year battle, and it was so hard, you guys. Oh my gosh. Even through the process, like our vehicle, because I had done that ministry for 2 years while we were in this house, but my vehicle broke down. And so I didn't even have a car. Like yeah, it was just so bad. And it was a battle. It was a fight on all aspects. And but God at the end of it, in his amazing grace, that youth pastor I told you that had been influenced to not let me be a part of youth group, moved to the lake, he and his wife. And we had a friend who had always been friends with them, but we end up building a relationship. He does this ministry on Sundays where we would go to his house, and he just invited sort of all of the disenfranchised, and he would teach us. And it was like an experience every Sunday. They fed us, and we would pray, and we would minister to each other, and it was just spectacular. Like, it was it was actually the first introduction for me. Because remember I told you I didn't like to go to Bible studies because I was more of a learner alone. I learn best when I'm by myself. This was the first time that I felt like that it was a healthy way to grow, to be in community. And God was changing my heart in that way, and he was using this pastor. And I told you after he had left the church that there was another pastor, youth pastor, who I didn't get along with. He was the one that we had hugged in that prayer meeting. And then there was another youth pastor after him, and he was the one who called me and said that he didn't want me around the children at all because and that was like, I was done then. I told you I never went back. And so I don't want you to get confused on the different youth pastors. There was 4 different ones. But this one, we built a relationship, and I love him so much to this day. He moved away, but my heart is full when I think of him. He's just the loveliest man. I love him so much. And he was there. He was there during some of the darkest times in my life, which was this 1.5 years at this house. We were there, obviously, for, 4 years and 5 months, but during that 1.5 years, he was there. And I'll never forget it, ever. I'll never forget. And what's funny is I love Stephen Furtick. If you don't know who he is, check him out. He's at Elevation Church. Shout out to Steve and their ministry. Awesome. I watched him yesterday online, and he had talked about a scripture about David when he went to battle the Philistines and how he was weary. But there was this man, and I can't remember his name, had come in and killed this Philistine who was after David because David was weary. And he talked about how can we be that man, like that man was for David. When David was weary, he stepped in and fought for him. And he said, how can you have those in your life, and how can you be those in your life? And that's who this man was for me. I was weary, and he fought for me. So I love you. I love you, Tom. So yeah. Anyway, we just continued to sort of live life there. But what was cool is at the end of this battle time, this 1.5 years of hell, came the summer. And it was one of the best summers I had ever had. My daughter had started college, and our friend had a boat. Our friend Tom had a boat. We would go out on the boat, and I figured out that I absolutely love being on the water. Even though I'd figured that out a little bit tubing, I didn't realize how much I love it. I love it. It's a place of peace for me. Just like at this house, I would go outside at night, and because it was sort of up, we had a super long driveway, it was sort of up. When you walked out, there was like a tiny little porch, but you could walk out and you could there was nothing blocking your view of the stars. And it would be spectacular. And then when there were storms, you could go out and you could see the sky when there was a storm, whether it's a snowstorm or a rain. It was just spectacular. I would love to step out on that porch and just stare at the sky. It was gorgeous there. I loved it. So I started to develop at this place, taking pictures for people, learning curve, ordered stuff for my studio, and just started learning more and more. Tom taught me about Photoshop, and I started training myself in Photoshop diligently. So this is sort of also the house where I started building up, doing photography and editing, and I got pretty good at it, And I had told you I had done some videos to youth group that third pastor Not after Tom, the pastor after Tom had let me come in and do video. But that was it, you know. But I learned how to do that too, so I was learning a lot. And during this time, I had a vision of a children's book. And it's an absolutely beautiful children's book. And a friend of ours, that leader who had organized that prayer meeting, his wife had illustrated some pictures for me. And I want so bad, to this day, it's not published. I want so bad to publish that. I was thinking about it a couple days ago. But it cost a lot of money to publish children's books. But it's a beautiful series, and I know that it would minister to children, especially right now in the pandemic. But I have no way of getting my story out there. And who knows, maybe I'm supposed to just do a video, because one of my favorite things, my grandkids were just here this past weekend, and one of my favorite things to do is to read to them. I loved reading to all three of my girls. I love reading to them, and I have a bunch of avid readers in our family. And so I'm thinking about just simply making the book, and ordering one book, and then maybe I'll get on here and just read that book. And I already bought, during this time at this house, I had bought ISBN numbers and stuff and done a lot of research. So I own ISBN numbers. I may do that actually as I'm talking to you. I just figured that out. I might do that and then just make a video of me reading this book. Yeah, but it costs a lot of money to print those. But I want to do it for my grandchildren, because the world is so dark right now. It's just so dark. And I believe that with this pandemic, it's killing our kids. They don't get to do normal things, and they don't get to build relationships and hug people and do all the things that our brain needs to function normally. We need community, you know, we need creativity, we need communication. And I'm not talking about this. I'm talking about face-to-face communication where it's tangible. And, okay, I'll get off my soapbox. I just know our kids need it. And my grandchildren need it. And adults need it. And so I pray that God in His mercy will end this. I will keep my personal opinion about things to myself. I just hope it ends, all of it. And soon enough that we can be a true community again. With that being said, back to this house. There came a point where I knew we were going to have to leave. And so 2 years, actually, we spent living out of boxes in this house. But before we had done that, all those pieces I had made and stored in storage, I was able to bring into this house, and they fit perfectly. And the Lord really blessed us with also more pieces, because I would find pieces while I was there, redo them, and bring them into the house. So it was really awesome to fill this house, and I was able to do it. Fill this huge house full of furniture without any money to do it. It was pieces of furniture I found on the side of the road that I refurbished. I spent money in stain and sweat. As a matter of fact, I'd spent so much time outside, and I was on a medication, which I would later find that my heart specialist had put me on this medication. And even though I tried to wean it down and ask him if we could take it, I had been on 7 medications at one, or taking medicine 7 times a day, had weaned down, and now I was on 3 or 4, and I had stopped 1 on my own, and then I was now on 3. Well, one of them makes you super sensitive to the sun, and I got pre-cancer on my shoulder. Well, when we moved into this house that we're living in now, I would find out that when I went, after he had retired, the next doctor said, I don't know why you're taking that medicine, you don't need it. You only need the 1 medication. And then the other is a blood thinner to prevent stroke, but you don't need that medicine. That was making me swell up and making me gain weight and made me, So praise Jesus, I've been off that medicine for a year, but while I was here, I got burnt a lot. So, because I spent a lot of time outside refurbishing stuff, and I even did pieces for a couple friends for free. But like I said, the year and a half that I had this strain with my family, after that year and a half, I had the best summer I ever had with this former my kid's former youth pastor, one of them. It was time for them to move away. They went to move away to be with their family, and it was hard because I had lost so many friends in the process of the struggles that we were having, whether it be the church or my family, my children. We had lost a lot of friendships, or even stuff that I was going through in my own head. It was hard. It was really difficult. So I felt kind of alone after that. Plus, I didn't have a vehicle. And I'm learning, like with my brain, I'm learning that, my brain, because of my medical conditions, I have bipolar, I have ADHD, and I have OCD, and I have an anxiety disorder, and I have severe PTSD, which probably causes all the other stuff. I'm always in fight or flight mode. It's like I'm always in one of those extremes, and and Scripture does back this up, that we can retrain our brain. When we dwell on whatever is true, noble, right, pure, lovely, admirable, excellent, or praiseworthy, when we dwell on those things, when we read God's word, when we spend time in worship, when we don't allow our brains to go down to worst case scenario and we think of best case scenario, when we choose life and speak life, it can influence, what our brain does, the neural pathways of our brain. My children have medical conditions that deal with the brain, and they take medication that help, change the neural pathways of their brain. And, it blocks the neurotransmitters and forces those synapses to go in a different direction. Well, I was starting to learn a lot about that. I was always in fight or flight mode, always coping. I was either allowing people in or shoving them away. Like there was an either or. It was hard for me to find a place of peace. Well, then came the time, and even in these parties, and I told you, my ex-husband, we had learned to be at peace with each other apart. We had learned to be, I told you that in a few videos back. We had learned to be at peace together apart. And so much so, I'm going to tell you kind of a miraculous sort of thing. My daughter had shared with me that she was going to have a baby. And it was around the time of her dad's birthday. So we had made a plan to have my ex-husband come to our house, and we were giving him a birthday party. Well, what he didn't know is that because my one daughter, the twin, knew, and I knew, but our youngest daughter and their dad did not know. My husband knew. So we have this birthday party, and one of the presents was giving them proof that that there was a baby, that she was going to have a baby. So we had this party, and like he was so moved by it, and it was weird because it wasn't weird. And even at my Christmas parties, he would come to my Christmas parties and stuff. I had friends would be like, "He's your ex-husband?" We're like, "Yeah, we just learned to get along for the sake of our family," which we did. It was weird. I don't know, and it's possible. We just chose to. A lot of it had to do with me keeping my mouth shut. I spent a lot of time in prayer, there had to be a place of forgiveness, or else it could go to ugly really fast. But we chose forgiveness and sort of made it work. It's weird. But yeah, that was pretty exciting, knowing that I was finally going to be a grandma. That was the one thing I had wanted to be since my kids had their period at 11 years old. I'm like, you know, grow up and have babies. Because, and I had already accepted at this point, which is funny because I had already resolved in my head that it probably wasn't going to happen for me because my kids had had so many medical problems. Like maybe with my youngest, and then I had a lot of female stuff too, but it was obvious babies could be made in our family because, you know, I was raped and first time having sex got pregnant. So even though we had endometriosis that ran in our family and stuff like that, my mom had 8 kids and was pregnant 4 times. Beside that, my grandmother had 8 kids, and you know, there was a lot of babies in our family. So it was really awesome. That was an amazing gift from God to be able to be a grandma. And we would find out while we were at this house that we were going to have a little girl. Ooh, which delighted me. So, yeah, I have a granddaughter, and she's beautiful. She's smart, and she's funny, and we love each other very much. Even though we don't get to be together, I'm not crazy about technology, but praise Jesus for video chatting because she's had me in her life her whole life because of technology. So I'm grateful for that. Even though I think sometimes it's terrible and addictive, I also am grateful for it at the same time. So with that being said, we knew that eventually we were going to have to leave this house. So I have a friend who's a realtor. So I asked her to start showing us houses. Well, bless her heart, she's one of my dearest friends, and I adore her. She patiently showed us houses on and off for 2 years of the time we lived here, 2 years. And as the time grew closer, because every year we would have to ask, and she would decide whether or not we could stay. So it was like literally every year. And what I had wished we had done is made it be make all the payments we had made toward buying the house, had it, you know, because even the realtor tried to help us. He's like, give yourself 3 years to build up your credit and then purchase the house. I wish we had been able to do that. But the Lord was very gracious because she had warned us like, hey, okay, now's the time I want to sell the house. We in 6 months got our credit to a place that we could buy a house. And so we had spent 2 years looking because I guess for me, I never dreamed that we could afford this house we lived in. But between the money that we had paid her over the 4 years, had we made it a, you know, rent to own sort of situation where all that money went toward the principal of the house, had we done that, we would have been able to afford the house easy. But we didn't do that, so we blew that chance. Well, when we're looking for the house and it comes to a time where she's like, okay, you guys have got to be out. Well, we didn't have a house to move to, so I asked her if we could make it to the end of September, you know, and she said she had agreed that at the end of September we would be out, and then she would put the house up for sale. We even tried to get her to sell it to us, but she would not include the tens of thousands of dollars we had paid her up to this point, being there over 4 years. She would include that, and she would not come down in the price, and she was asking way too much for the house. And so I'm like, okay, you know. And then her brother, she had lived in Florida, but her brother had lived up here, and this is an odd thing, and I will tell you this. Her brother had lived up here, and he would come and check in the house every once in a while and stuff, but he got diagnosed with something, and he was dying as we were moving. During these last 6 months, he had gotten really sick, which was weird, because like the timing of it was amazing because she wouldn't have anybody to look after the house anymore. and she had already decided that she wanted to put it up for sale. Well, God had given me this date, 7/21. And I was like, okay, because God had given me dates before. You know, he had given me, and I told you this, he had given me 5/19 and 9/13, and one, you know, it ended up helping. One of them had everything to do with my addiction to seeking leadership approval and people pleasing, and like they all had significant things, because God just speaks to me in dates. He does. He doesn't speak to everybody in dates. He speaks to me in dates. But anyway, the 7/21, and I'm like, okay, whatever. So we're looking at these houses for 2 years and could not find one. And there was this house, beautiful house in a neighboring town, and I wanted the house. My husband was like, nope, too old. It was like a 92-year-old house, beautiful brick house, and I just loved it. He was like, no, sorry. Well, my brother had said that he wanted to look at it because I told you he owns property, so we had met him at the house to look at it. Well, when we were driving back, I was driving back with our realtor, and the date happened to be 7/21. Well, we drive past a house, and I'm like, hey, I go, we keep saying we're going to look at that house, and we keep forgetting to look at that house. We need to set up an appointment to look at that house. And she's like, oh, yeah. Now, mind you, it's 7/21. We have to be out of our house, and we don't even have one by September. Yeah. So we drive past the house, and I'm like, oh, we need to look at that. So I sort of, it was a Sunday, and I sort of just didn't think anything of it. I don't know why I didn't think anything of it. I just didn't. But I go home, and the next morning I hear a knock on the door, and I open the door, and I'm like, it's my friend. I'm like, what are you doing here? She's like, remember, we're supposed to go look at that house. And I'm like, oh, because every time we went to look at this house, I would forget. I would forget. So she goes with me. We walk in the house, and I immediately know, like, okay, this is the house we're supposed to have. And I see on the wall scripture, and I'm like, oh, for sure, this is the house. And what's funny, what was weird is the house had a really super strong smell. It was a terrible smell. And I just knew, like, whatever that smell is, it smelled like mothballs. I'm like, we got to get that smell out of here. Because it, like, I'm super hypersensitive to smell, and it was making me sick to my stomach. It was terrible. Like, I don't know what it was, but it was an awful smell. So, which we suspected was a carpet in the basement, where she had stored her stuff and used mothballs. Well, we end up getting, you know, putting in an offer, and they accept the offer. Well, we had to be pre-approved and everything. And what's funny is we had gone to the bank and done everything that we could, and you know, we had been waiting after we knew we wanted the house and stuff. We had been waiting for the bank to call us to say, yeah, you're pre-approved, because we had done everything that we were told to do, you know, and we're waiting. 1 week goes by, 2 weeks go by, 3 weeks go by, 4 weeks go by, 5 weeks go by, 6 weeks go by, 7 weeks go by. 7 weeks. And I'm like, is this supposed to take this long? Like, we had gone through all of this. And it was on my youngest daughter's birthday. We were out for her birthday, her 21st birthday. And my friend had come to where we were eating so that we could sign the papers because they had accepted our bid on the house. And so we signed the papers and stuff. And then we just wait. We wait for the bank to do what the bankers to do what they're supposed to do. And we're waiting. Well, from the time that we had dealt with him to the time I got the phone call, 7 weeks had gone by. 7 weeks. And it should never take that long to know that you have the financing in place and stuff. But for some reason it was. We thought we were good to go when we had signed, you know, when they had accepted the bid and everything. We thought, like, hey, we're all good to go. Well, then my birthday comes up, And it's my 50th birthday, and I get a phone call. And it's a banker we had been dealing with. He's like, yeah, I forgot to submit this one paper. I forgot to submit it. So the financing fell through, and you don't have financing for the house. And I'm like, what? And I'm like, we got to be out of here in 6 days. What do you mean? Like, what do you mean? Like, what do you mean? And I was trying hard. I said, but you said if we did this, 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 and this, it would. And he goes, I know, I just forgot to submit this paper. Well, I'm devastated. Because I'm like, what are we going to do? Remember, we had already been homeless once for, 6 weeks. I didn't want to do this again. And so he goes, the only thing I can do is give you this number. This guy at this, that's the only thing I can do, this financing thing, this mortgage company. All I can do is give you this guy's name to this mortgage company. So I hang up the phone, and I immediately pick the phone back up, and I call him, and I'm like, hi, this is Melinda. This is my situation. And he listened. He's like, okay. And he goes, I'll take care of it. And I gave him the number to the banker and stuff. And he's like, this is what I need you to do. I need you to get, that stuff emailed to me. Here's my email address, whatever. And I'm like, well, because I'm like, it's my 50th birthday. We're having a party. We're literally going out the door to have a party. And he goes, listen, you go enjoy your party, and just, I'll take care of the rest. Don't you worry about it. I'll take care of it. And I'm like, okay. And it was really difficult for me, because I'm like, okay, God, this is in your hands. Because we had done everything we were supposed to do. We, after losing the other house, we had built our credit up, and, we had gone through all the application, done everything we should do, crossed all the T's. And this guy forgot to submit something, so the financing wasn't there. We had spent a lot of time trying to figure this out, and now it's my birthday, 50th birthday, and we have nowhere to go. And so I leave, I go to the party, okay? Now, mind you, I think, I can't remember what day it was. It was a Friday, I think, okay? A Friday or Saturday, Friday. I think it was a Friday. So we had to be out the following weekend of this house. In 5 days, and I'm not joking, you guys, not joking. In 5 days, he had done, not only had he gotten it all the way through, he got it to the underwriters. He got it, he did everything he needed to do. He said, it took him 3 days, because they have to come and inspect the house. It took him, in 3 days, he got everything, that the paperwork done, and got it inspected or whatever. And it took him 48 hours to get it into underwriters. And 5 days. 5 days it took him to do what took 7 weeks, because the guy forgot the piece of paper. And I was amazed. And I got to tell you, so much so that I wrote this big review on their Facebook page. I'm like, I have to tell you this story. Well, it was so moving to them that the owner, the head honcho of the business, is in another state, and having a convention of realtors, opens up this convention with our story. He opens up the convention with our story. I was amazed. This guy, literally, God used him to do a miracle, and I'm forever grateful. Eric, thank you. And so we got the house, and we were going to move. Problem is, we found out that in the process, that the realtor had decided to go on vacation in the middle of it, and we couldn't get in the house. Oh, so funny. We couldn't get in the house. So we had nowhere to go again. But we have some awesome friends, and we had been around this tree before, so we were kind of better at knowing what we needed to do. So we called a friend and we're like, hey, you have an RV, right? And it was a different friend. And they're like, yeah. We're like, hey, can we park it, at my husband's mom's house? Can we park it there and just live in it until the house is ready for us to close? And they're like, absolutely. And we also talked to our landlady, and we asked for a week extension. So it actually turned out not too bad. We only had to stay in it for 6 days. And so, which was nothing for us, because I'm like, it's like camping. We can do this. And we had our stuff, because we had been slowly preparing for everything, because we had our stuff in, because this was a big house. We had our stuff in 2 storage units and at his mom's house. Like, we had a lot of stuff, So we had already taken all of it because, like I said, we had been living out of boxes for 2 years, because I'm really particular about when you move, be prepared. Like, everything should be packed up and ready to go long before you ask people to help you to move, because when you ask people to help you to move and you're not prepared, I think it's disrespectful. So I was ready, man. 2 years before we moved, I was ready. So we had everything in storage and stuff, so we were all prepared for that big day when we were going to be able to close on that house. And so it was actually, we had stayed 6 days in the thing, and the day that we, in the RV, and the day that we closed was actually the anniversary of my brother's death. Yeah, it was the 26th anniversary of my brother's death, the day we closed on the house. And that house is this house that you see in these videos. And it's still in the lake. And it's where we live. And I'm going to save what happens in this house, because we've been here 4 years now. And there's quite a bit that has happened in this house. Quite a bit. A lot of pain, a lot of healing, a lot of hope, a lot of grace, a lot of forgiveness, a lot of moving on and getting better in this house. And even though it took me a long time, because I had to grieve not having that house every time I drive past it, I'm like, I miss that house so much. It took me a minute to get used to this house being our forever home on this earth, because I loved that house we were in, and I know God had given it to us, but we didn't get prepared in the waiting, so we lost the blessing, and that was our fault, not God's. But He gave us a second choice, which was this house. And it was the house that I had driven by on 7/21. Yep, sure was. So God in that 7/21 was telling me the house, just like He had told me 3 months, when He had given me the date, 3 months, and in 3 months we had moved from when we were living out what I call my wilderness time, when we had moved back here. It happened in 3 months. So, yeah, 7/21, and we were in this house. With that being said, it's an hour, so I'm going to end here. I know there's probably stuff I'm forgetting. I know that I skimmed over a lot of stuff, but I don't think it's necessary for you to know the details of some things, because I feel like it's just going to be fodder, and I don't want that. I want to honor my family in this. I confess to you that I am doing this out of obedience to the Lord. I want for Him to be glorified and honored in the story, and not to do damage to people. I said that from the beginning. I also feel like, to be honest with you, I feel like nobody's watching these videos anyway, so it doesn't matter. But even if they don't, there's value in this story. And God was being glorified in it. And he loved me enough to set me free. Little old Melinda from Detroit. The little kid hiding in the closet, pulling her own hair, hating herself. And in this house that we live in now, there'll be a lot of me dealing with my mental health struggles and stuff, and coming to accept myself for me. Because through this process, what's funny is because when I was younger, I found such value in the way that I looked. Because I think that at one time I was pretty when I was young and I was thin. I don't now, so I don't. As you get older, there really isn't anything to fall back on except for your character. Because people are going to see right through you. And because your beauty fades. Scripture says beauty fades, and it really does. I have no value to anybody. I'm not physically strong anymore. I've gained an outrageous amount of weight, 100 pounds since I married my husband. The only value that people are going to see in me is my character. And my character comes from Christ. I can't imagine facing this world without Jesus, especially now. It gets darker every day. People start claiming lies for truth and truth for lies, and I can't imagine living life without Jesus. I just can't. I can't. He is kind, and he is good, and he is gracious. And to every day I wake up, and no matter how I feel, physically or emotionally or mentally, I have hope because I have Jesus. It's not a cliche. It's not just something I do. It's not religion. It's relationship. And I pray that at some point through this you find that. Is it easy? No. Are there days I'm defeated, discouraged, and depressed? Absolutely. But I still have hope. I always have hope. And in this house, we've seen a lot of hope realized. We really have. With that, I love you guys. Sorry it's been a minute, but my brain needed some time to recover. And I want to honor these last two. I want to honor the people in my life because they're so important. And I knew that I was going to be vague, where I've been so authentic and honest in all the other ones. Not that I'm not being authentic, but I'm protecting the people I love because their stories are their stories. And what's funny, side note, this house, I forgot to say when we moved in it, not this house, the house I've been talking about the whole time, that first Christmas there, because remember I had said we had our very first Christmas with our whole family at the big house that my friend cleaned at. My son was able to come again and we were able to have a second Christmas there. That would be the last Christmas that we've been able to be together. But they got snowed in. They were only supposed to stay a couple days, and it ended up being like 6 days or something, 4 or 6 days, because they got snowed in. And it's a lot of fun, good time, and the house was nice and big, and yeah, so we could be together. Yeah, that was something I forgot to say about that. And there was a lot of nuances like that there. My daughter, my youngest daughter, won national champion for small group while we lived in that house too. Yeah. So That's where I found out I had my granddaughter coming. And so, a lot of good memories, a lot of painful ones. Year and a half of painful. But even in the painful, there was beauty. Beauty in the pain. And there was a lot of learning there. Yeah. A lot of loss, but a lot of learning too. So with that, it's 1:06 and Melinda out.